Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Ramesh and this is my final project screencast for American 200. Throughout this semester we have concentrated on the three main cultural units of race, class, and gender. In this screencast we will explore the changes that have occurred in each cultural unit throughout our history to better understand how slavery, racial hierarchy, and segregation have impacted the development of race within our society. Also, how the idea of class in regards to poverty, possession of property, and an individual's perception within the public realm have impacted our society, and how gender has impacted the individuals throughout our history by defining their roles within society, also along with the rights and freedoms that they can attain. We start our race unit by looking at slavery in America, which began during the 17th and 18th century when millions of African slaves were kidnapped from their homes in Africa and brought across the Atlantic to work the agricultural crops such as tobacco and cotton. Slaves resisted their captivity and forced enslavement by rebelling against slave owners and traders, which resulted in harsh punishments. As we look at our first primary source, we see a group of captured slaves resisting their captivity by revolting against a slave trader. It is important to note the unity among slaves who are working together to attain their freedom. Slavery fostered the idea of racial hierarchy in America, as slaves were seen as uncivilized and lacking in mental ability of the superior white race. This level of superiority has allowed the white race to have a status of being privileged over other races, which allowed them to treat others with discrimination because they are not of the same level or standard. In the 19th century, the dominant white race viewed the Native American population as savages because of their lifestyle, and they attempted to civilize Native Americans by removing all elements of their savagery. As we can see from our second primary source on the right of the Indian school, in this image most of the children are bare feet and have overgrown hair. The boys and girls are wearing what seems to be handmade clothing and headwear necessary for a rural lifestyle. In the eyes of the white race of this time period, these children would have been viewed as savages not only for their appearance, but for the war their people had fought against the civilized white-dominated America. In the second image of these children, we see a completely transformed group of children who have lost their savage ways by conforming to what the white society viewed as civilized. They have shed their savage clothing and hair for those of white lifestyle of the late 1800s. According to the caption of the image, the children have also been given Christian names to go along with their new religious beliefs and values. Such ideas of racial superiority allowed the white race to control all aspects of life for the lesser races, in particular the black American population. Although slavery was abolished after the Civil War, many states enacted Jim Crow laws which required segregation in schools, housing, and public transportation for whites and blacks. Changes were necessary and began in the 1950s and 60s as the black population resisted the laws of segregation and discrimination against them, as their ancestors had resisted their enslavement. Through the efforts of civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, the black population was able to achieve true freedom with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. While racism remains an issue in our current society, these events in our history have allowed us to come to understand the importance of equality for all races. We started our class unit by looking at how class was viewed and controlled within the public realm. While the ideas of public can relate to the freedoms given to the population within public spaces, forms of authority can regulate who is and what is acceptable within the public realm. In our third primary source, we looked at the Laws of Sumptuary of 1651, which place restrictions on what can and cannot be worn in public. Items such as jewelry, scarves, and boots were seen as excess in apparel for both men and women. The laws were created to control the intolerable excess of fashion in the public eye, because it was seen as unacceptable to the community, and it was the duty of authority or lawmakers to condemn upon all sorts of persons the sober and moderate use of those blessings. Such a law was based on the social class as to who could attain such wealth to be displayed within a public realm. In our fourth primary source, we look at the New York Married Women's Property Act of 1848, which provided the necessary guidelines that guaranteed a woman sole ownership to her real and personal property, whether acquired before or after marriage. This law exempted the husband of a married woman from acquiring or controlling of property owned by his wife. It also protected the married woman from the disposal of her husband nor to the liability of his death. This law is an example of how wealth was kept at the disposal of the wealthy and was protected by government officials elected to power to enact such a law for their protection. Both of the sources we just looked at relate to the idea of poverty, which transcends all racial and gender, since an individual must first have the means necessary to attain the wealth which is being restricted in public or the property that is being protected by such a law. While restricting class within the public realm no longer applies, the idea of class in the public realm are still visible within today's society. By examining an individual's lifestyle, clothing, and other material possessions, we can determine his or her social class within society. The ideas of class have changed over time because society has demanded change. In order to attain equality in terms of slavery, the abolishment of slavery removed the label of property from Black Americans and provided them the opportunity to acquire real property or wealth for their own upward mobility. In our final unit, we look at gender in America. In this unit, we focus on how gender can affect the rights and freedoms an individual can attain. The term domestic was used to refer only to an upper-class white woman who represented the American vision of family, where the women are responsible for the home and children. This label of domestic placed on upper-class white women restricted the rights and freedoms women could attain, since society predefined their roles once they entered into marriage. As we can see from our fifth source, A Confederate Lady's Diary by Mary Boykins Chestnut, which implies that a white domestic woman provided the moral ground for her household by exempting the woman's role in slavery and its cruelty while denouncing a man who chooses to have relations with a slave woman. Although Chestnut condemns slavery as a monstrous system, she does not expressed sympathy for slave women forced into relations by their masters by saying the lower the mistress, the more degrading they must be, while labeling the white domestic country women as pure angels, uh, who are surrounded not only by the evils committed by their own men, but by those of the slaves as well. Although a woman in marriage may appear to be content with her situation, she must mask her true feelings because it was seen as unacceptable in a male-dominated society. In our sixth source, we look at the image of the plantation dance. We see a group of African slaves performing a dance outside of their home. The image is meant to mask the brutality of slavery by showing a scene of celebration among the slaves. Unlike the white population, who were viewed as citizens with the rights to marriage, slaves were not given these privileges because such an act would provide them with the same rights as the superior white population. It is important to note that a slave woman could not attain a role of domestic within her household because these rights of marriage were denied to her. Finally, the image connects with the idea of marriage being a form of slavery, because a married woman is bound to her husband as these slaves have been bound to their owners. The idea of gender has changed over time as gender groups have fought for not only change but for the acceptance within society. While society still places the female gender within the role of the household, her dependency on a male has been removed by education and economic development. Thank you for watching my screencast, and I wish you the best in your continuing studies.